Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into the thick air and narrow streets of a medieval town. Though calling it fresh might be the biggest historical inaccuracy of the night. The moment your boots hit the cobblestones, well, cobblestones if you're lucky, more likely churned mud and a few stubborn rocks, you know you've arrived somewhere both fascinating and faintly threatening. The houses lean toward each other as if gossiping over your head, their upper floors jutting out so far they almost touch. Somewhere above, laundry flaps in the breeze, although it's doing a poor job of hiding the smell of tanneries, stables, and centuries of questionable drainage choices. And yes, you probably won't survive this, at least not in the comfort-loving, germ-conscious, fan-humming style you're used to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love for you to post your location and local time in the comments so we can see just how far this little time travel experiment is reaching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've barely taken 2 steps before your boots sink halfway into something that is most definitely not just rainwater. There's a donkey cart ahead, creaking slowly forward, and behind it, a trail of, let's call it organic matter. You sidestep quickly, congratulating yourself on your reflexes, only to be clipped in the shoulder by a man balancing 2 sloshing buckets on a yoke. One drop lands on your arm. You decide not to think too hard about its contents. The smell here isn't just bad, it's layered. Historians still argue whether medieval streets were truly ankle-deep in filth, or if that's an exaggeration. But from your perspective, this is not the time to split hairs. It's a mix of smoke from cooking fires, the sharp tang of human waste from chamber pots, emptied too casually, and something faintly metallic from the blacksmith's forge, just up the lane. You breathe through your mouth, which turns out to be a mistake, because the taste in the air is just as alarming as the smell. A street vendor waves you over, shouting in a dialect that feels halfway between English and a language you've never heard. You realize he's trying to sell you some form of meat pie, though the exact species of the meat is unclear. The crust is enticing, golden from lard and ash oven heat, but a glance toward the stall's kitchen, 2 planks and a bucket, gives you pause. You politely decline. You pass a group of children playing with what looks like a leather ball. One kicks it, and it bounces toward you, except it's surprisingly heavy. When you pick it up, you discover it's been stitched together from scraps of hide and stuffed with rags. The kids laugh and dart away, one of them barefoot and nimble despite the puddles. You make a mental note that in this world, shoes are a luxury, not a guarantee. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls. Not the sonorous cathedral chime you'd expect, but a sharp, almost frantic clang from a small church. A passerby mutters something about vespers and hurries off. You get the sense that here, time is measured not by clocks, but by bells and the angle of sunlight slipping between crooked rooftops. A man leading a pig on a rope squeezes past you, the animal grunting indignantly. You step aside into the shadow of a doorway, only to find yourself face to face with a woman kneading bread in a basin on the floor, her elbows deep in dough. She eyes you for a long moment, then returns to her work, muttering in a tone that suggests you're not the first stranger to wander too close. You keep moving, but every corner seems to offer another sensory assault. The muddy lane you're on slopes downward, and a rivulet of something dark and opaque trickles along the gutter. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rings steady and sure, each strike sending sparks into the dim air. The rhythm is almost comforting until you notice the tanner's yard across the way, where hides hang from wooden frames and vats of foul-smelling liquid bubble ominously. Mainstream historical fact. Towns like this were often ringed by walls, their gates shut at night to keep out raiders and control trade. Quirky tidbit. Those same walls also trapped smells inside like a very unpleasant perfume bottle. And historians still argue whether the average medieval townsperson ever truly became nose-blind to all of this, or if they simply endured it the way you're trying to now. A sudden commotion draws your attention. A man in a faded red tunic is shouting at a younger fellow who's just dropped a sack of grain. The spill attracts a flock of pigeons instantly, their wings flapping in a noisy frenzy. You skirt around the scene, not eager to get involved, though you can't help but notice how quickly bystanders step back. Here, disputes are handled without much subtlety, and you have no interest in becoming part of the entertainment. Somewhere behind you, a shout rises in what might be a warning, or just someone calling a friend. Either way, it's enough to make you quicken your pace. The day is still young, but your introduction to medieval street life has already left you longing for soap, clean water, and a safe corner to hide in. Unfortunately, the next corner holds its own surprises, and none of them are designed for your comfort. The corner you just turned leads you into a narrow alley where daylight thins to a silvery thread. Here, the wind dies and the air feels thicker, almost velvety, though that's not a compliment. A hunched figure shuffles past, their arms wrapped around a bundle of cloth, eyes darting in the dimness. You glance down and notice the ground here isn't even mud. It's a slurry, a blend of rainwater, kitchen scraps, and unmentionables you'd rather not inventory. Before you can second-guess yourself, a woman steps from a doorway holding what looks like a folded blanket. She thrusts it toward you. At first, you think she's offering a gift until you realize it's a tunic. Your tunic. Somehow, while you were gawking at the rooftops, someone relieved you of your outer layer, and she's here to sell it back to you. You mutter something about not needing it, and she shrugs, disappearing again. That's your first quiet lesson in medieval times. Possessions change hands quickly, often without paperwork. You make your way to the edge of the alley and out into a wider street where a group of men are gathered around a cart piled with cloth. The colors are rich, deep blues, reds, and greens, and you're almost impressed until you touch one and discover it's scratchy enough to double as a scouring pad. This is your first proper introduction to medieval clothing. Thick wool for warmth, coarse linen for underlayers, and a general absence of anything you'd call soft. A trader in a hooded cloak gestures to a bolt of fabric and launches into a pitch about its quality. He uses words like finest weave and imported, but you're already itching from the sample draped across your forearm. There's no cotton in this mix. Wool dominates, and any luxury like silk is reserved for the elite. You realize that the modern comfort of slipping into a hoodie or sweatpants is centuries away. You glance around, trying to spot someone who looks comfortable in their clothes. No one does. Even the wealthier townsfolk have layers so heavy they walk stiffly, like they're carrying their own bedding. Historians still argue whether medieval people simply developed a tolerance for the constant itch, or whether everyone just walked around slightly irritated all the time. Mainstream fact: wool was the dominant textile in much of medieval Europe, with England becoming a major exporter of raw wool to the continent. Quirky tidbit: urine was sometimes used in the fulling process to clean and thicken the fabric, which might explain a certain lingering scent when the wind shifts. You try not to think about that as you notice a tailor's apprentice beating a piece of damp cloth against a post. A boy runs past, carrying a bundle of something bright yellow. You follow him with your eyes and notice a small shop where a woman is stirring a vat over a fire, dipping fabric into it. The smell hits you, sharp and tangy, with a metallic edge, and you realize this is a dyer at work. Bright colors are a status symbol here. The richer the hue, the higher the rank. Your plain tunic would have marked you as common from a mile away. Another man brushes by, the fur lining on his cloak brushing your hand. It feels softer than anything else you've touched today, but still not exactly cozy. Furs are expensive, heavy, and reserved for those with coin, or those willing to risk wearing them without the proper status, which could be dangerous in a society obsessed with sumptuary laws. Imagine getting fined for looking too fancy. You're suddenly aware of your own underlayers, stiff where sweat has already begun to dry. The fabric chafes against your skin, and you think longingly of cotton t-shirts. You also think about laundry, then realize that in this town, laundry day involves hauling your entire wardrobe to a river and hoping the current doesn't take it. A small crowd gathers around a peddler selling leather belts and gloves. The gloves look almost inviting until you notice they're stiff enough to stand on their own. He offers you a pair, flexing them to prove their quality, but they still feel like they'd take weeks to break in. You politely shake your head, knowing your hands would rather freeze than sweat in leather that unyielding. The sun peeks between clouds, and for a moment, the street glows, only to reveal the flecks of lint and dust that cling to every sleeve and cloak. You catch sight of a young woman adjusting the ties on her bodice, the strings frayed from years of use. Nothing here is disposable. Garments are worn, mended, and reworn until they're little more than patchwork. You pass a man whose robe drags in the muck. He doesn't seem to notice. Or maybe he does, but knows it's not worth washing until it's absolutely necessary. The hem is already stiff with dried mud, and as you watch, he steps into another puddle without hesitation. This is clothing meant to endure the environment, not escape it. Your neck itches, your wrists itch, even your ankles itch. And that's when you realize, if the clothes don't get you, the fleas might. You glance down at a passing dog, its coat crawling with tiny movement. You step away, wondering if you've already picked up a passenger or two. Ahead, the street widens again, and you catch sight of a crowd gathered near a wooden platform. You can't see what's happening yet, but the murmur of voices pulls you forward. You adjust your itchy tunic, take a deep breath of the least offensive air you can find, and step into the next challenge of your medieval day. The crowd parts just enough for you to see the source of their fascination. A well. At first, you think it's just a gathering spot, a place for gossip and idle chatter. But then you remember why you've been feeling a growing thirst. You've walked streets lined with questionable puddles, past buckets of who knows what, and avoided drinks that looked like they might try to swim away from you. A sip of clean water feels like the one thing that could rescue your day. You approach, but as you get closer, optimism falters. The well is stone-lined and topped with a wooden frame, but the rope and bucket look like they've been through more seasons than you have birthdays. A woman ahead of you lowers the bucket, hauls it back up with practiced ease, and tips the water into her jug. You notice the sheen, not the glimmer of fresh mountain spring, but a faint rainbow slick on the surface. Not exactly the refreshment you were hoping for. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval towns, wells were the primary water source, often shared by hundreds of people. Quirky tidbit. They were also a convenient disposal site for everything from spoiled food to the occasional unlucky animal. Historians still argue whether the contamination levels were always lethal, or if some communities managed better upkeep than others. The woman offers you a ladleful, and here's your dilemma. You can't refuse without seeming suspicious or rude, but every instinct you have says, do not drink this. You take a polite sip. The taste is earthy, and not in the charming mountain spring way. There's a tang you can't place, metallic maybe, and a slight grit between your teeth. You hand back the ladle with what you hope passes for gratitude. As you step aside, a boy runs up with a bucket and dips it in without waiting his turn. He takes a gulp, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and grins, apparently none the worse for wear. You remind yourself that his immune system has been trained for this since birth. Yours has been trained by filtered tap water and iced lattes. You wander away from the well, scanning the street for an alternative. A small tavern sits half hidden behind a low archway. You duck inside, instantly enveloped in the warmth of a smoky hearth and the smell of something stewing. The tavern keeper eyes you up and down before nodding toward a bench. When you ask for water, he snorts and offers ale instead. Here's the thing. Ale is safer, at least marginally, because the brewing process kills some of what's lurking in raw water. But safer is doing a lot of work in that sentence. The mug he brings is cloudy amber with a faint foam clinging to the rim. You take a sip. It's warm, slightly sour, and far stronger than you expect for something called small ale. You understand now why people here drink it from breakfast to bedtime. It's liquid calories, hydration, and if you're lucky, mild disinfection. A man at the next table leans over and tells you in a conspiratorial whisper that the ale here is nothing compared to the wine down at the Dockside Inn. He also tells you the Dockside Inn is mostly safe, which is not as reassuring as he thinks. You decide to finish your drink and leave before curiosity drags you somewhere your wallet, or your liver, might regret. Back on the street, your thirst is temporarily dulled, but your stomach feels uncertain. You pass a row of houses where women lean out of upper windows, tossing buckets of gray water into the street below. You sidestep just in time to avoid a splash, realizing this is the other half of the medieval water cycle. Get it from the well, use it for cooking or cleaning, and then throw it somewhere gravity will take care of. You're standing exactly where gravity tends to take it. Your thoughts wander to how water shaped entire communities here. Wells were meeting points, strategic assets, and sometimes targets during sieges. A poisoned well could wipe out a whole district in days. The idea that something as basic as a drink could be your undoing is unsettling, and yet it's woven into the rhythm of life here. People drink, some get sick, life goes on. You catch sight of another well in the distance, this one guarded by a man in a heavy cloak. He's collecting coins before lowering the bucket, a sign that the water here is considered cleaner, or at least more exclusive. You're tempted, but the memory of that first sip still clings to your tongue. Instead, you turn down a side street, telling yourself you'll find refreshment in the morning meal instead. It's only as you pass under a low stone arch that you realize your mouth is still dry, your stomach is still skeptical, and your next stop, wherever it is, better offer something edible. Of course, in medieval times, edible is just another gamble. Your stomach has been negotiating with you since the well incident. Polite at first, then increasingly persuasive, and now fully unionized with a list of demands. You follow the smell of heat and grain to a stall where steam lounges lazily above a blackened pot. The vendor, apron stiff with whatever yesterday was, stirs with a paddle the size of an oar. Inside, breakfast, or at least the local interpretation of it. He ladles something thick into a wooden bowl and hands you a wooden spoon. The entire set clearly designed by someone with a personal vendetta against dishwashers. The mixture glows a soft beige, speckled with darker bits that might be barley husk or might be ambition. You brace yourself and take a sip. It's pottage, porridge's sturdier cousin, grain simmered until time gives up. It tastes like warmth, like smoke, like a field that's had a long day and would like a nap. This is the kind of food that sits in your stomach and sends a quiet memo to your muscles. We'll see what we can do. The vendor tosses a wink and drops a curl of something greenish on top. Leeks, maybe, or a heroic spring onion. He gestures at a crock of salt, and you add a careful pinch, aware salt is precious here. The second spoonful arrives softer, almost friendly, and for a moment, you forgive the century for everything it has done to your senses. Mainstream historical fact. In much of medieval Europe, bread and pottage were the bedrock of daily calories, with oats, barley, and rye leading the lineup for common folk, while wheat was the show-off grain of the well-to-do. You can taste that hierarchy. This bowl is honest barley with a side of oat, no wheat in sight, unless it's hiding as a garnish. You get a slab of bread as a bonus. Dense, dark, and confidently rectangular. It's almost a tool. You wedge it under your thumb and use it to scoop porridge like a medieval spork. The crumb is tight, the crust is a workout, and a whisper of sour tells you yesterday's dough starter was old enough to hold opinions. Somewhere in your modern memory, soft sandwich bread sobs quietly. Two children dart past with bowls of their own, and you clock the morning choreography. A line forms, a ladle lifts, steam blooms, and the town begins to hum. Breakfast isn't a universal ritual here. Historians still argue whether most adults ate an early meal or waited until mid-morning. Monastic schedules, fasting rules, and budgets played referee. But laborers heading to the fields? They'll take calories when they can get them. The body doesn't care about the etiquette of hunger. You ask, gently, with your best smile, what's in today's pot? The vendor lists the ingredients like a prayer. Oats, barley, yesterday's broth, a pinch of herbs, a handful of dried peas, and a memory of bacon. It's the poetry of scarcity. Meat is rare in bowls like this, appearing as a rumor more than a presence. On fasting days, fish or just plain pottage replaces anything luxurious. The church calendar is a sous chef with very firm opinions. A woman at the next bench tears her bread and dips it into small ale. You remember the tavern keeper and his warm, honest brew. Here the ale is gentler, leaner, a breakfast version you might call calories with a side of bravery. She squeezes you a smile that says, "We're all doing the best we can," then goes back to coaxing breakfast into being delicious. The vendor offers a drizzle of something from a little earthenware jar. You sniff. Honey, thin and floral. You nod, and he paints a ribbon across your bowl. Suddenly, the porridge puts on a bow tie. It's still practical, but it's now practical with charm. Even the spoon seems more agreeable, though that could be your imagination, or the honey negotiating directly with your soul. Quirky tidbit. In some places, people ate sops for breakfast. Bread softened in ale or broth, a kind of medieval cereal that, frankly, sounds both clever and exactly like something invented by someone who broke their last tooth on yesterday's crust. You tilt your bread into the bowl to make your own sop, congratulating yourself on historical accuracy as it soaks up warmth like a tiny sponge with ambition. Across the square, a smaller pot bubbles. A waft reaches you. Onions, maybe a cracked egg if someone's hens were feeling generous, and the ghost of herbs that grew bravely beside a wall. A boy runs by with a basket of cheese, the little hard rounds wrapped in cloth. You catch one for a closer look. It smells like a barn's best version of itself. Earthy, a hint of grass, a suggestion that the cow had strong opinions about clover. You hand it back before those opinions become a debate. A man in a faded hood drops onto your bench, elbows out, bowl already half conquered. He nods at your bread. Good maslin, he says, meaning the loaf's a mix of grains, rye and wheat most likely, because pure wheat is a festival guest, not a weekday friend. You nod back, chewing dutifully. The crust fights your teeth. Your jaw writes to HR. Above you, a window opens and gray water streams into the gutter. Your reflexes, now well trained by the town's casual relationship with gravity, carry your bowl a polite inch away from the splash zone. Breakfast here is a contact sport. You take another steadying spoonful. Still good, still smoky, still the edible equivalent of a handshake. The vendor leans close, conspiratorial. Sometimes, he says, we stir in yesterday's stew. He pats the pot. Flavor sleeps here. You picture a timeline of meals, each one leaving a faint fingerprint in the next, like rings in a tree. Economical, yes, but also strangely lovely, as if the town itself is slow cooking its memories. Two jokes drift through your brain as your spoon does laps. First, that this porridge has a better work ethic than you did last Monday. Second, that your Fitbit would log the chewing as resistance training. And third, because rules are rules, that the bread could probably double as a spare roof tile in a pinch. You keep them to yourself because the vendor looks proud and you are, against all odds, content. You try not to think about the ergonomic nightmare that is eating without a table, but your knees and a boule have notes. Nearby, a pair of carters share a trencher, a thick slice of stale bread used as a plate, catching drips and surrendering its dignity one sop at a time. When they finish, they'll pass the trencher to a dog or a beggar or the compost heap. Nothing here is disposable because nothing here is spare. The sun heaves itself a hand's width higher and the square brightens. In the better light, you notice flecks of chaff in your porridge and shrug. Fiber. You think of your modern breakfast. Berries, yogurt, toasted something announcing its ancient grains, and are surprised to find you don't miss it. Not right now. This bowl has momentum. It asks nothing of you but patience and a steady hand. A bell rings. 1, 2, 3 notes, and the stall's line thins as people drift toward work. The vendor dips his paddle, scrapes the pot's sides, and offers you one last spoonful for luck. You take it. The flavor is deeper, bottom of the pot rich, like the last paragraph of a chapter you didn't realize you were finishing. You set the bowl aside, stretch your neck, and breathe. The air is still a collage of oven smoke, damp wool, and the town's open-air plumbing philosophy, but your stomach has found a small square of peace. You're fueled, if not enlightened. Somewhere a child laughs, and somewhere a pig disagrees with its leash, and somewhere a crow lists all your mistakes from the roofline. You're ready to move, slowly, carefully, with porridge courage in your veins. As you stand, the bench complains, and your knees vote for a quieter century. You pat your tunic, still itchy, forever itchy, and thank the bowl silently. If the water here wants you gone, breakfast has filed an appeal. For now, you're alive, fed, and medium confident that the day cannot possibly surprise you again. You are, of course, completely wrong. You shuffle into the main street, still thinking about the porridge, when a commotion ahead pulls your focus. People are stepping aside, bowing their heads, not deeply, but enough to mark a difference. And then you see him, a man in fine wool, dyed the deep, expensive blue that almost hums in the sunlight, a short fur-lined mantle over his shoulders and a sword at his hip. The crowd parts instinctively, like iron filings around a magnet. You've just encountered a noble, and your instincts, modern, casual, hopelessly egalitarian, tell you to give a polite nod and carry on. Your instincts are wrong. You're in a world where status is not merely recognized, it's enforced. One wrong gesture, one accidental word, could be the start of a spiral you'll regret. Mainstream historical fact: medieval society was rigidly stratified, with nobles, clergy, and commoners bound by a hierarchy reinforced by law, religion, and custom. Quirky tidbit: in some places, sumptuary laws literally dictated what colors and fabrics different classes could wear, making fashion a legal minefield. Historians still argue whether enforcement was strict everywhere or mostly symbolic, but the fear of overstepping was real enough to keep most people in line. You step back, avoiding eye contact, but in your haste, you accidentally nudge a boy carrying a bundle of firewood. The bundle spills. The boy curses softly, not at you, but at his own luck, and scrambles to collect the pieces. Unfortunately, the noble's gaze flicks toward the sound. His expression is unreadable, but two of his retainers step forward. They're not armored like soldiers, but their boots are cleaner than anyone else's in the street, and that alone makes them stand out. Whose fault? One asks, looking between you and the boy. It's not an accusation so much as an opportunity to assign blame. Your mind races. You could claim ignorance, but in this world, strangers with odd clothes and odd manners are suspicious by default. You stammer something about helping, and the retainer smirks, a small, not entirely friendly curve of the lips. The noble says nothing, just gives a flick of his hand. The retainers step back. You exhale. That was your introduction to the dangerous ballet of status navigation. Everyone here knows their place, and even accidents are sorted by rank before truth. As you continue walking, you notice the subtle choreography of the street. Lower-ranked townsfolk press against walls when someone important passes. Market stalls pause their calls to let a better-paying customer browse. Children duck out of the way entirely, their games resuming only after the noble's shadow disappears. You try to match the rhythm, stepping aside when others do, but you feel like a dancer who's joined mid-performance without rehearsal. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a man in a long robe, a wide leather belt studded with metal, and a ring that could double as a knuckle weapon. He glares, not because you touched him, but because you didn't yield enough space. A muttered, "Mind yourself," follows you as you slip past. The robe, you realize, isn't just for warmth. It's a walking resume, declaring wealth and connections in every stitch. You glance down at your own clothes. Coarse wool, travel-worn boots, nothing to draw attention. You might pass for a poor traveler if you could stop gawking at everything like it's an open-air museum. That, unfortunately, is harder to hide. A group of apprentices jogs past, their identical tunics marking them as belonging to the same master. They carry tools and supplies, laughing among themselves. But their laughter stops when they pass a stern-faced older man with a chain of office around his neck. Status silences even youth. You file that away. In this place, your role is always visible, and stepping outside it invites scrutiny. Historians still debate whether medieval people were constantly aware of rank, or whether it was so ingrained they acted without thinking. Standing here, you suspect both are true. Awareness is baked into every interaction, and habit keeps it running smoothly. You, on the other hand, are a disruption. Not dangerous yet, but noticeable. A woman in fine linen and a delicate veil sweeps past, her maid carrying a basket behind her. You can smell rose water as she passes, a rare, expensive scent that doesn't belong anywhere near your current level of the social ladder. You almost smile at the absurdity of it. Even in a town where sewage runs underfoot, there's still perfume drifting in the air, like a defiant reminder that luxury exists. Then a voice cuts through the din. "You there!" You freeze, turning to see one of the noble's retainers again. He gestures you over. Your pulse spikes. You shuffle closer, every nerve telling you to keep your tone respectful. Your words few, and your eyes mostly on his collarbone. The retainer doesn't accuse you of anything. Instead, he asks where you're from. You invent a village name that sounds plausible enough. He grunts and warns you to keep clear when the lord's on the street. Then he waves you off. You walk away, resisting the urge to run. You've survived your first brush with the upper class, but it's clear that here, you are an object to be sorted, assessed, and managed according to the invisible but ironclad rules of rank. And those rules? They don't bend for outsiders. Somewhere up ahead, you hear a hammer striking wood and a faint cheer from the market square. You head toward it, not realizing the next challenge will involve sharp tools, questionable medical advice, and the kind of trust you're not ready to give. The sound of hammering draws you toward a stall at the edge of the square, where the smell shifts from bread and smoke to something faintly metallic, faintly medicinal, and faintly unsettling. A man in a leather apron leans over a bench, a collection of knives, saws, and clamps laid out in neat rows. At first, you think he's a blacksmith working small, until you notice the patient. It's a boy, maybe 12, perched on a stool with one bare foot resting in a wooden trough. His face is pale but calm, as though this is just another Tuesday. The man grips a curved blade and begins trimming away something from the boy's heel. Your stomach tightens. You realize you've wandered into the medieval equivalent of a healthcare appointment. Mainstream historical fact. Medicine in the Middle Ages was a blend of Galenic theory, herbal remedies, and a dash of superstition, with barber surgeons handling everything from tooth extractions to amputations. Quirky tidbit. Barbers displayed a red and white striped pole outside, the colors symbolizing blood and bandages, because yes, your haircut and your surgery could be handled by the same person. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons were genuinely skilled practitioners or simply the bravest people willing to take the job. You step closer, and the surgeon glances up, giving you the once-over. "Need tending?" he asks, eyes flicking toward your boots. You feel a hot spot on your heel, probably from walking in damp socks. But before you can say no, he gestures for you to sit. Against your better judgment, you do. He kneels, unlaces your boot, and peels back the wool with the careful efficiency of someone used to bad news. The blister is small, but he frowns as if you've presented him with a real puzzle. From a pouch at his belt, he pulls a pinch of powder and sprinkles it onto the skin. The sting is immediate, sharp enough to make you suck in a breath. Ground wormwood, he says, keeps the rot out. He wraps your heel in linen and knots it with a twist. The linen smells faintly of vinegar, which you're hoping is deliberate. Around you, the market noise goes on. Someone shouting about fresh eels, a dog barking, the thud of a mallet on a butcher's block. None of it masks the metallic clink as the surgeon drops a coin-shaped disc into a basin of water and watches it fizz. You don't ask. As he works, he talks about the sickness last winter, about the time he set a broken leg with nothing but a splint and strong ale, about the noble woman who swore by pigeon droppings as a poultice. He seems proud of his improvisations, and you realize that here medical practice is as much about resourcefulness as it is about anatomy. The boy's mother steps forward with payment, a chicken. The surgeon tucks it into a crate without breaking conversation, then pats the boy's head. Transaction complete. You wonder if he'd accept a thank you in lieu of payment, but you suspect the answer is no. He finishes tying your bandage and tells you to keep it dry. You glance at the mud outside and almost laugh. Keeping anything dry here is like keeping a candle lit in a storm. You nod anyway. He waves you off, already turning to the next patient, a man with a toothache so bad he's holding one side of his face like it might fall off. As you step back into the square, you spot a small shop with bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters. The air inside is fragrant, earthy, chamomile, sage, and something sharper, maybe yarrow. A woman in a plain wimple is crushing dried leaves with a mortar and pestle. She greets you softly, offers you a sniff of a jar. It smells like mint and rain. For the stomach, she says. You realize this is the other side of medieval medicine, the apothecary's world of herbs and infusions. If the surgeon is blunt force, the apothecary is gentle persistence. You thank her, but her smile says she knows you'll be back when the street food inevitably betrays you. Historians still argue whether herbalists and surgeons cooperated or competed for patients. From the look in the apothecary's eye when she mentions men with knives, you suspect the latter. Back outside, you feel the bandage shift slightly in your boot, the wormwood sting fading to a dull throb. It's not comfortable, but it's holding, for now. You've just had a brush with the healthcare system, and the system has left its mark. As you pass the edge of the square, the smell changes again, sharper this time. You follow it without thinking, and in moments, you're in a narrow lane lined with vats, hides, and streams of liquid you'd rather not step in. Whatever comfort the bandage gave you is about to be tested by the next trial. One that will challenge not just your stomach, but your ability to breathe. You don't so much arrive at the tannery as it arrives at you, nose first, like a wall you can't see. The air thickens, takes on weight, and suddenly your sense of smell is wearing a weighted vest and asking for a break it will not receive. Vats the size of bathtubs squat along the lane, each one a different shade of don't ask. And hides hang from beams like tired flags surrendered to an olfactory empire. Your bandaged heel protests the uneven planks underfoot. Your stomach files a formal complaint. Your nose starts updating its resume. A boy tips a bucket into one of the vats. You catch notes of smoke, sour fruit, and something that has politely retired from being organic. Mainstream historical fact: medieval tanning used urine, animal fats, and plant tannins to loosen hair and preserve hides. It worked, but the process made smell into a full-time occupation. Quirky tidbit: in some towns, people brought household urine to tanners for a small fee or tax credit, which means the civic economy once relied, quite literally, on liquid assets. You take a step back, and because the universe loves a slapstick routine, your heel skims the edge of a shallow channel that carries away whatever the vats don't want anymore. You regain balance with a curious little dance that your future physical therapist would label preventative care. A man in a stained cap stirs a vat with a pole and waves at you with the kind cheer only lifelong exposure can distill. He shouts something about oak bark and thyme. You nod, pretending to be a connoisseur of notes like forest floor layered over apocalyptic cheese. Historians still argue whether tanneries were consistently confined to downwind districts by law or mostly shunted there by custom and collective survival instinct. Either way, you can feel the zoning in your eyes. You retreat into adjacent lanes, but the town has decided to give you the full sampler. A butcher's block thumps in a steady rhythm, and the air picks up an iron tang. A woman rinses offal in a tub, emptying the water into the gutter with the casual wrist flick of someone who has done this since childhood. Cats gather like critics, sitting just out of reach with expressions that say, "We will be writing a review." Someone somewhere is smoking fish on a rack, and the scent threads through the heavier notes, like a friendly cousin who arrived late to the family reunion and did not get the dress code memo. Above, a shutter slaps open. A chamber pot empties. Gravity resumes its favorite job. You've learned the drill. Sidestep, don't look up. Don't perform the mental arithmetic of who, what, and how recently. Mainstream law and order reality. Many medieval towns passed ordinances about when and where waste could be thrown, often requiring a shout of warning before release. Useful, but not foolproof. You hear someone actually call out a courteous "Gardy-loo" or its local equivalent, and you award points for sportsmanship as a splash lands just shy of your boot. Joke 1. Congratulations, you've completed another level in Medieval Frogger Sanitation Edition. You duck under a timbered overhang into a alehouse doorway to let the street rinse itself of danger, and your nose gets a small mercy. Smoke and malt, the rustic cologne of people trying to make daily life drinkable. The innkeeper holds a pomander up to his face, a pierced metal ball stuffed with herbs, and takes a dignified sniff. He notices your curiosity and offers you a turn. Inside, rosemary, sage, maybe a sliver of orange peel if the trade routes have been kind. You breathe in, and for a heartbeat, your senses are allowed to believe in gardens. He shrugs. Keeps the bad airs out. You nod, knowing that miasma theory, the idea that disease travels in foul smells, will have a long career ahead. Historians still argue how deeply this belief shaped urban planning versus how much it simply justified what noses already demanded. You step back outside and nearly collide with a pair of women scattering fresh rushes into a shop. Nature's carpet, scented with mint and a touch of marsh. It's part deodorizer, part traction control, part confetti for the daily parade of feet. The floor rustles agreeably. Joke 2. Your sneakers, somewhere in the future, experience a phantom itch of jealousy because these rushes are getting all the attention today. The shopkeeper explains that herbs in the rushes help sweeten the place. You believe her. You also note yesterday's rushes piled near the door in a state that argues for a brisk turnover. Another lane, another lesson. You find the gong farmer at work, one of the people hired to empty cesspits when they get alarmingly enthusiastic. He's up to his knees in a hole the town pretends not to notice, winching buckets up to a cart with the focus of a saint and the pay rate of a hazard bonus. Quirky but true sidebar. Gong farmers often worked at night and were paid surprisingly well for a job that inverts glamour but keeps civilization moving. He grins as you pass, and you offer the sort of nod one reserves for firefighters and astronauts. Your nose, meanwhile, is writing a memoir. Past the lane of necessities is the lane of aspirations, a perfumer's cupboard, if that word can be stretched to mean shelf with bottles. Musk, civet, and the brave new world of imported resins sit in stoppered glass. The merchant dabs a dot on your sleeve. It smells like someone bottled ambition and poured it over a forest floor. You wonder if you'll make enemies by walking past the tannery wearing this, like arriving at a campfire in a raincoat and declaring you've solved weather. And then, the bathhouse, its timbered frame steaming softly, voices echoing behind the door. Contrary to the most stubborn myth, people did wash. How often and how thoroughly is another argument. And yes, historians still argue whether bathhouse culture peaked in the High Middle Ages before waning in later centuries, but the line of townsfolk waiting with towels suggests that warm water is a crowd pleaser in any era. A woman frowns at your bandaged heel and advises you to keep it dry. You appreciate the concern, decline the soak, and make a private date with a basin later. Somewhere a bell tolls the hour, and the town exhales and inhales on cue. The breeze shifts, sweeping a ribbon of river air through the streets, and for a few moments, the smells thin into layers you can process: bread and horse and smoke and human and hay. Your senses calibrate. You remember you have a body below your nose. Joke 3. Your brain, detecting the relative freshness, decides to file a customer satisfaction survey. Question 1. Would you recommend this breeze to a friend? Strong, yes. A friar passes with a sprig of herbs tucked under his nose, a walking endorsement of the nosegay as personal air filter. Behind him, 2 children chase each other with slings of damp cloth, laughing high and pure. Life insists on itself, even here, even now, even alongside vats and gutters. You follow the children's path until it breaks into the market's side lane where sunlight angles between roofs, catching dust like glitter at a very honest party. To your right is a garderobe, a privy jutting from an upper wall, its chute disappearing into mystery. You do not walk beneath it. You do not even walk near it. You step around with the slow, ceremonious care of someone negotiating a truce. The town rewards you with dry boots and the sudden thrill of seeing a clean bucket of well water carried toward a bakery. Inside, hands powder the air with flour. The smell tilts back to comfort. Your stomach, reassured, unclenches a fraction. You keep going. By now, you've mapped the city by scent. The good, the brave, and the unforgettable. If you made a guidebook, the chapters would be Smoke Where Bread Lives, Stables of Honesty, and Here Be Vats. The lesson lands gently but firmly. Survival here isn't just calories and caution. It's learning which wind to face and which to let pass, which threshold to duck, which shout to heed. You reach the edge of the lanes and step into broader daylight. The smell labyrinth gives way to the usual chaos of carts, hooves, and people whose errands are louder than your thoughts. Somewhere ahead, a wheel hits a rut with a bang. A goose announces its manifesto. A puddle gleams with the suspicious sheen you're learning to interpret like a meteorologist. Your day resumes its moving parts, all of them in motion, all of them waiting for an unwary foot. You breathe in, out, the town breathes with you. Your nose, newly educated, quietly votes for emigration. Your feet, bandaged and brave, vote to carry on. You square your shoulders, adjust your itchy tunic, and step into the flow, where the hazards aren't bottled in vats anymore. They're rolling on wheels, wearing horns, and pretending to be puddles. The street widens enough for 2 carts to pass, though pass here is a generous term. It's more of a negotiation conducted in wood, hooves, and raised voices. You've barely cleared the tannery lane when a 2-wheeled cart, stacked high with hay, lurches toward you. The driver shouts something that might be, "Move, brr," or might be, "Mind the rut." Either way, the horse's eyes are rolling, the wheel is leaning, and your best move is a sideways hop that would impress a cat. Your bandaged heel protests, but you land out of the way, straight into the path of a flock of geese. They hiss like they've been holding grudges since the last crusade. One lunges, beak snapping, and you realize geese don't care about your 21st century innocence. They care about territory. You wave your arms, mutter apologies, and step aside again, which somehow puts you in range of a woman balancing a basket of fish on her head. She doesn't break stride. You flatten against a wall until the procession, cart, geese, fish, moves on. Mainstream historical fact: medieval streets were shared spaces for humans, animals, and commerce, without clear traffic rules. Quirky tidbit: pigs were infamous for wandering freely, scavenging scraps, and occasionally causing enough trouble to be put on trial for property damage or injury. Historians still argue whether these animal trials were legal seriousness or just moral theater, but either way, you give the next pig you see a very respectful berth. A shout draws your attention. 2 boys are rolling a barrel downhill. The barrel wobbles, picks up speed, and heads straight for a group of chickens who scatter in a feathery panic. You press into the doorway of a cooper's shop, inhaling the scent of fresh wood shavings as the barrel clunks past. Inside, the cooper is fitting iron hoops to another barrel. His mallet blows steady, despite the street chaos. You step back out and are nearly sideswiped by a donkey laden with sacks. The driver tugs the rope and mutters to the animal, but his eyes are on a merchant across the street, waving a ledger. For a moment, you're caught between the donkey's flank and a low cartwheel. Your heel grazes the wood. The bandage holds. Somewhere in the mess, a loose chicken darts between your legs, wings brushing your shins before vanishing into the crowd. Historians still debate how much of medieval street life was daily hazard versus occasional spectacle. But here, it feels like both. Every moment offers the chance of a minor collision, a splash from an unknown source, or a live animal detour. The cobblestones, where they exist, are uneven, and the gaps hold puddles that gleam with a rainbow sheen you've learned not to investigate. You try a side street, thinking it might be calmer, only to find a carpenter sawing planks right in the middle of it. The air smells of resin, the sawdust catching in your throat. You skirt around, but your shoulder brushes a stack of timber, sending one piece rolling into the path of a passing dog. The dog stops, sniffs it, and decides it's worth guarding. You leave before you get drafted into that standoff. A man with a bundle of sticks bumps your arm, muttering without looking at you. Behind him, a group of children are playing a game that involves tossing a leather ball against a wall and catching it before it hits the ground. The ball bounces toward you. You sidestep. It thuds into a puddle. The children groan. You offer to toss it back, but they shake their heads, probably deciding the puddle has claimed it. Mainstream fact number 2. Livestock markets were often held in town streets. turning public spaces into temporary corrals. You round a corner and walk straight into one. Sheep penned between ropes, bleeding at the press of bodies. A man waves a stick to herd them, and you flatten yourself against a post to let the woolly tide pass. Your tunic catches a few tufts, and you decide not to check for passengers. Somewhere to your left, a cartwheel hits a pothole with a crack. The driver curses, then climbs down to inspect the damage. While he works, another cart tries to pass, and for a moment the entire street is jammed. Carts nose to nose, animals shifting uneasily, people trying to thread between them without losing limbs. You take the opportunity to slip into a narrow gap and out the other side, heart thumping from the press. Joke 1. Your modern brain keeps looking for crosswalks, even though here the entire street is a crosswalk, and an obstacle course, and sometimes a barn. Joke 2. The geese were friendlier than the fish lady. Joke 3. If you survive this without a hoofprint somewhere on your person, it will be by luck alone. You pass a man sweeping with a broom of bundled twigs, his progress less about removing dirt than redistributing it. He pauses to let a cat slink by, the animal's tail held high like a flag, declaring independence. Two boys run past carrying buckets, sloshing water onto your boots. You sigh. Keeping the bandage dry is becoming an abstract goal, like peace on earth or a quiet medieval street. Ahead, the market square opens again, filled with voices, laughter, and the clang of metal on metal. You spot a familiar figure, the magistrate's clerk, perhaps, and realize the bustle here comes with its own risks. Not every hazard is hoofed or feathered. Some wear robes and keep records, and you're about to learn that a misunderstanding can be just as tricky to dodge as a runaway barrel. The market square is a swirl of motion, stalls crowded with cloth, baskets of turnips, and trays of pies that all seem to be held together by optimism more than crust. The din is constant, hawkers calling, customers haggling, livestock muttering their own complaints. You're just beginning to relax into the rhythm when a voice barks, "You there!" You look up. A man in a long robe, cinched with a braided cord, is pointing directly at you. He has the confident posture of someone who doesn't need to shout twice. Two assistants flank him, both carrying scrolls. This is the local magistrate, or at least his clerk, and you, apparently, are the day's subplot. You step forward, heart thudding, wondering what you could possibly have done. He gestures toward a pie vendor. The woman behind the stall is frowning and speaking rapidly. Holding up a small hand pie, you catch the words "took" and "didn't pay." Your stomach drops. Mainstream historical fact, medieval markets ran on strict local regulations. Weights, measures, prices, and behavior were overseen by appointed officials. Quirky tidbit: cheating customers could result in public shaming, but cheating vendors could also face the pillory. Historians still argue how much of these rules were enforced daily versus only during official inspections. You stammer that you haven't taken anything. The pie vendor insists otherwise, claiming she saw you near her stall when a pie disappeared. You think back. You did pass her earlier, distracted by a juggler throwing knives. Well, mostly catching them. But you're certain your hands were empty. The clerk steps closer. His assistants unroll a sheet and start noting details. Your description, the vendor's claim. It feels absurd, but in this setting, even a small accusation can grow teeth. The clerk asks if you're from here. You say no, which earns a raised eyebrow. Outsiders, you realize, are convenient suspects. They have no allies, no reputation to defend them. A small crowd gathers. Some watch with idle curiosity, others with the interest of people who wouldn't mind seeing the day get more entertaining. A boy whispers to his friend pointing at you. Somewhere in the back, a man mutters about thieves from the road. You feel the weight of collective suspicion settling like a cloak. The clerk produces a set of scales, ornate brass pans swinging on a beam. He asks if you'll submit to a trial by purchase, buying a fresh pie to prove you have coin. If you can pay without hesitation, he'll let the matter drop. If not, well, he doesn't finish the sentence, but you've seen enough stocks and whipping posts to guess. You pull a small coin from your pouch, the only one you've got, and hand it over. The vendor takes it with the brisk efficiency of someone who's won this round. She hands you the pie, a lopsided half moon with steam curling from the edge. The clerk nods, signals his assistants, and the record is rolled up. You've been cleared, not of suspicion entirely, but of immediate consequence. The crowd disperses. Some still glance back at you, as if filing away your face for future reference. You take a bite of the pie out of sheer stubbornness. It's filled with minced meat, onion, and enough pepper to make your eyes water. Either this is an acquired taste, or it's been weaponized. Historians still debate whether market disputes like this were common or just vivid when they happened. Standing here, with pepper stinging your nose and your pulse still racing, you suspect they happened often enough to keep clerks busy. As you finish the pie, you hear a hawker shouting about oysters, a delicacy in your mind. But here they're the food of the poor, cheap and plentiful from the river. You're tempted to try one, but then remember the well water. The pie has already pushed your luck. Raw shellfish might file for overtime on your digestive system. You wander toward the far edge of the square, passing a stall selling honey cakes, another with bolts of faded linen, and a third with live chickens. A woman haggles over a rooster, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. You slip past, aiming for a quieter lane. Your stomach is full, your name is mostly clear, and you've avoided immediate punishment. But the smell of roasting meat drifts your way, richer than anything you've had yet. It comes from a vendor working a spit over open coals, the fat sizzling and dripping. The sight is tempting enough to make you forget your recent brush with the law. You take a step toward it, unaware that food here carries its own hidden dice roll, and you're about to play without knowing the odds. The roasting smell is like a rope around your ribs, pulling you toward the stall. A man in a grease-darkened tunic turns the spit. The meat, somewhere between a rabbit and a mystery, browning in the firelight. The scent is hypnotic. Smoke, fat, and the faint crackle of skin blistering to crisp. You can hear the juices hissing as they hit the coals, sending up little bursts of savory perfume. He catches your eye, grins, and carves a chunk onto a slab of bread. Hot, he warns, though you're already reaching for it. You bite in. The outside is glorious, charred just enough to bite back. The inside, tender and salty. You swallow before your tongue has a chance to remember every hygiene lecture your modern life ever gave you. Mainstream historical fact: street food was common in medieval towns, from pies and sausages to oysters and pancakes. Quirky tidbit: in port cities, seafood stalls sometimes doubled as unofficial news hubs. Come for the mussels, stay for the gossip. Historians still argue whether street food was more a treat or a daily staple for workers without kitchens, but no one debates its unpredictability. Your second bite is less glorious. There's a hint of something you can't quite name, gamey, slightly sour, and probably a couple of hours past its prime. You tell yourself it's just the seasoning, though seasoning here is often code for masking flavors that have developed their own personalities. The bread under the meat is tough and carries the faint tang of the last stew it met, probably yesterday. You chew carefully, deciding this is not the time to inspect too closely. A dog wanders up, nose twitching, eyes fixed on your hand. Its ribs are visible beneath its coat. You toss it a corner of bread. It snaps it up and trots away without thanks. The vendor chuckles and says something about the dog's loyalty being for hire. You take another cautious bite. A boy sidles up to the stall, offering the vendor a few coins for a skewer. The meat he gets looks different, paler, thinner, and cooks in seconds over the fire. He eats it with the confidence of someone who's never read a single modern article about foodborne illness. You remember the apothecary's jars of herbs and wonder if you should go back and buy something for the stomach, just in case. Historians still debate whether medieval spices were valued more for flavor or for their supposed medicinal qualities. Here, pepper, cumin, and garlic are your best friends, not just for taste, but for camouflage. You watch the vendor dust a finished portion with a blend from a small pouch. The smell sharpens, comforting and faintly suspicious at once. A man next to you orders blood pudding, a dark sausage cut into slices and fried in its own fat. The vendor offers you a taste. You hesitate, then try a small piece. It's rich, earthy, with a texture somewhere between crumbly and creamy. It's also hotter than the surface of the sun, and you spend a full 30 seconds breathing carefully to avoid an undignified cough. Joke 1. Congratulations. You've now eaten something that doubles as both breakfast and iron supplement. You step back from the stall, wiping your fingers on a scrap of cloth the vendor hands you. The cloth smells faintly of mutton, and you suspect it's been in circulation all day. A pair of travelers approach, their cloaks dusty, their boots thick with dried mud. They greet the vendor warmly, swap a few coins, and receive a packet wrapped in leaves. Food for the road, portable but still suspect. Nearby, a woman sells cheese from around the size of a small wagon wheel. She cuts wedges with a knife that's seen more sharpening stones than soap, then wraps them in scraps of cloth. The cheese smells sharp enough to wake the dead, but the customers seem pleased. You think of the bread and cheese simplicity of your breakfast and almost miss it. Then, from a few stalls down, a shout. Someone's arguing over a skewer of meat, waving it like an accusation. The vendor defends himself, claiming it's perfectly good and that the customer just doesn't like mutton. The customer drops the skewer in the dust and storms off. The vendor shrugs, picks it up, and tosses it back on the fire. You feel your stomach tighten, not from hunger this time. Joke 2. Medieval food safety could be summed up as, it's fine if it doesn't kill you right now. Joke 3. You've just paid for the experience of playing digestive roulette, and the wheel is still spinning. You wander away, chewing the last bite of your mystery meat, and trying to decide whether the faint tingle in your gut is satisfaction or warning. Either way, you know you've rolled the dice. And if the day is determined to test you, it won't just be with what you eat. It will be with where you try to sleep tonight. You leave the market with a belly that feels like it's holding a diplomatic summit between the porridge, the meat pie, and the mystery skewer. Your next thought is simple. You need somewhere to sit down and, if fortune smiles, rest for a while. In the 21st century, that means a bed you can name by brand. Here it means anything horizontal without visible splinters. You follow a narrow lane to a timbered building with a painted sign swinging above the door, a bed and a jug, the universal medieval shorthand for "we have both ale and somewhere to pass out." Inside, the air is thick with smoke and the sweet sour tang of spilled drink. A man behind a counter nods toward the stairs when you mime sleep. Coins change hands. You climb. The room is small, with a single shuttered window and a bed that looks like it has survived several owners, all of them heavier than you. The straw mattress is lumpy, the linen cover worn thin in spots. You sit down, and a faint rustle answers you from within. You freeze. The rustle answers again, this time followed by the tiniest sensation on your wrist, like someone dragging a feather with bad intentions. Mainstream historical fact: bedbugs and fleas were an unavoidable part of medieval life, thriving in straw bedding and woolen clothes. Quirky tidbit: wealthier households sometimes had servants beat mattresses with sticks to chase out pests, though the results were temporary at best. Historians still argue whether the average medieval sleeper just tolerated these roommates or tried in vain to evict them nightly. You stand, brushing your sleeve, and consider your options. The bed is still a bed. The alternative is the floor, which might be cleaner in theory but colder in fact. You decide to make peace with the mattress, lifting the cover to inspect. The straw inside is darker in some spots, compressed in others, and smells faintly of the last person's dreams. You flatten it out, shake the pillow, a lumpy sack filled with feathers that crunch faintly, and lie back. The first few moments are almost pleasant. The straw gives a little under your weight. The air from the shutter carries a whiff of something fresher than the room, and your body sighs at the chance to be horizontal. Then you feel another tiny movement along your calf, and another. The peace treaty is broken. You roll to your side, pulling your cloak over yourself as an extra barrier. The cloak smells of smoke from the market fires, which might just be enough to confuse the mattress's smaller residents. Joke 1. You've essentially just built a tent on top of a haystack in a room the size of a generous broom closet. From the tavern below, muffled voices drift up. Laughter, the clink of mugs, the thump of boots on wood. Someone starts singing, and half the room joins in, the melody winding through the cracks in the floorboards. The bed creaks as you shift, the sound blending with the music in a way that makes you think this building has been performing its own soundtrack for decades. You glance at the window. The shutter is ajar, letting in a blade of afternoon light and a sliver of sound from outside. Cartwheels, a bark, the distant toll of a bell. For a moment, it's almost peaceful, until something nips your ankle. You sit up, check your sock, and find nothing. Either the bugs are shy, or you're already imagining things. Historians still debate whether medieval inns were uniformly miserable or varied widely, depending on location and price. Your current verdict? Variety exists, but misery is holding a steady lead. You decide to rest without fully sleeping. The mattress complains as you shift to the edge, one foot braced on the floor, ready to stand if something inside the bedding gets too bold. Joke 2. Your posture now perfectly matches that of a cat who doesn't trust the chair it's sitting on. An hour drifts by in half dreams, your thoughts looping between the day's smells, the itch at your wrist, and the distant sound of someone downstairs losing a drinking contest. When you finally stand, your back has acquired a new list of complaints, and your ankle is mysteriously itchy again. You smooth your tunic, adjust your cloak, and head downstairs, thinking maybe fresh air will do you good. But as you step outside, a deep, resonant clang from the church tower calls the town to gather. You're swept into the slow-moving crowd, heading toward a service you didn't plan to attend, and where the real hazard might not be the sermon, but where you choose to stand. The crowd flows toward the stone bulk of the parish church, its bells still echoing through the air like a summons you can't politely refuse. You fall in behind a group of townsfolk, their Sunday-best tunics only slightly less worn than their weekday ones. The church looms ahead, its entrance flanked by weather-softened statues whose faces have been erased by time or indifference. Inside, the air is cooler, dimmer, and smells of wax, damp stone, and the faint tang of incense. A line of candles flickers along the altar rail, their flames bowing to drafts that sneak through cracks in the walls. You instinctively look for a pew, but here, the floor is mostly open. Commoners stand, nobles have benches, and anyone of status high enough to warrant a cushion gets to sit without apology. You shuffle to the side, trying to blend in. A woman in a wimple glances at you, then pointedly at the spot you're occupying. You realize you've stood in a space reserved for a local guild, their emblem carved into the wall nearby. You murmur an apology and slide away, the social equivalent of dodging a runaway cart. Mainstream historical fact: seating in medieval churches reflected strict social hierarchies, with prime spots reserved for nobility, guild leaders, or wealthy patrons. Quirky tidbit: in some towns, disputes over church seating led to formal complaints, or occasionally brawls. Historians still argue whether these arrangements reinforced faith or simply turned the nave into a weekly reminder of who outranks whom. The priest steps to the front, his voice filling the stone space in a mix of Latin and the local tongue. You catch phrases about charity, sin, and the importance of obedience. Around you, people murmur responses at practiced intervals, like a call-and-response song where the melody has been memorized since birth. A boy shuffles past carrying a small bucket of holy water, pausing to dip a sprig of herbs and flick it toward the congregation. Droplets land on your sleeve, cool and faintly fragrant. You're not sure if it's meant to bless you or just keep the air from getting too heavy. Joke 1. Either way, it's the cleanest your tunic has been all week. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. The stone floor is unforgiving, and the service shows no signs of speeding up. The light from the high windows cuts through the incense smoke, painting golden shafts in the air. In one, dust motes drift like lazy snow. A child at the back begins to cry, the sound quickly hushed by a grandmother's hand and a handful of candied nuts. Historians still debate how much medieval congregations actually understood of Latin sermons. Here, you suspect the rhythm and presence of the ritual matter more than the words. The priest's cadence has a lulling quality, the kind that seeps into your bones if you stop resisting. Midway through, a man in fine robes enters from a side door, flanked by attendants. The crowd subtly shifts to acknowledge him. Heads dip, eyes lower. He takes his place near the front, and you recognize him as the noble you narrowly avoided crossing earlier in the day. You angle yourself behind a taller man, suddenly very interested in the church's stained glass window depicting St. George and a dragon that looks suspiciously like a large, startled dog. When the service ends, there's a flurry of movement. People cross themselves, whisper to neighbors, and begin filing out. You're swept along toward the doorway, the sudden press of bodies making it hard to breathe. Outside, the sunlight feels almost foreign after the cool dimness of the church. Bells ring again, lighter this time, signaling the transition back to ordinary life. A woman offers you a small wafer of bread as you pass. You thank her, unsure whether it's charity or a sales pitch. She smiles in a way that could be either. You tuck it into your pouch for later, thinking about how even sacred spaces here are woven into the fabric of daily survival. Food, reputation, alliances. Joke 2. You survived medieval church seating without a formal reprimand, which might be a local miracle. Joke 3. You now know that wrong place here applies as much to where you stand as where you step. The crowd disperses into the streets, some heading back to the market, others toward taverns or homes. A few linger in small knots, exchanging gossip under the church's shadow. You slip away, drawn by the sound of music and laughter from a side lane. The day's not over yet, and apparently neither is your education in what passes for entertainment here. The music leads you to a broad courtyard strung with banners that have clearly seen more seasons than fabric was ever meant to. The colors are faded, but they still flutter bravely in the breeze, framing a makeshift stage where two men are taking turns reciting bawdy rhymes. Their audience roars with laughter, tankards sloshing. The smell of ale, roasting chestnuts, and wood smoke wraps around you like an unwashed blanket that somehow still feels inviting. A woman with a basket of apples weaves through the crowd calling her price. Nearby, a man is juggling knives. Well, juggling in the sense that he's keeping them mostly in the air and only occasionally glancing worriedly at his hands. You pause to watch. He catches your eye, grins, and tosses one a little higher, maybe just to make you flinch. You do. He laughs and turns back to his routine. Mainstream historical fact: public entertainment in medieval towns ranged from musicians and storytellers to jugglers, bear baiting, and mock combat. Quirky tidbit: in some regions, town records mention paying performers in ale or meals rather than coin. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were purely for amusement or also served as informal marketplaces for news and gossip. At the far end of the courtyard, a group is playing a game that looks like a cousin of modern football, except the ball is a bundle of rags and the goals appear to be "don't die." You sidestep as the bundle bounces dangerously close, carried forward by two men who clearly think shoulder checking counts as sportsmanship. The crowd cheers, and someone hands you a mug of something sweet and fermented. You take a sip. It's closer to cider than ale, sharp but drinkable. A small stage is set up for a troupe of musicians: a fiddler, a drummer, and a man playing something halfway between a lute and a piece of furniture. Their tune is quick, bright, and encourages stomping more than dancing. People join in clapping, their timing enthusiastic, if not accurate. You tap your foot despite yourself, the rhythm cutting through the day's fatigue. Then, a ripple through the crowd. Two men arguing loudly, voices pitched above the music. One's accusing the other of cheating at dice. Wooden cubes clatter to the cobblestones, scattering underfoot. The musicians hesitate, eyes darting toward the commotion, but keep playing. A couple of bigger men step in, separating the gamblers with the ease of people who have done this more than once. You edge away, not wanting to become collateral in whatever version of conflict resolution they're about to employ. Joke 1. In this century, audience participation is sometimes less about singing along and more about dodging someone's flying elbow. A boy in patched trousers tugs at your sleeve, offering a carved wooden whistle for a copper. The whistle is rough, clearly whittled in haste, but when you try it, it lets out a clear high note. You hand over a coin and tuck it into your pouch. Unsure if you've bought a souvenir or a medieval alarm system, historians still debate whether these informal entertainments were tolerated by local authorities or constantly at risk of being shut down. Judging by the presence of a town watchman leaning against a post, sipping something from a clay cup, it seems the line between tolerated and ignored is pleasantly blurry today. The jugglers give way to a storyteller, a tall man with a voice like gravel and a repertoire clearly designed for maximum audience reaction. He launches into a tale of a knight, a dragon, and a shepherd's clever daughter. The crowd hoots at the bawdier asides, groans at the knight's blunders, and cheers when the daughter outwits both man and beast. You catch yourself smiling, realizing that even with half the cultural references sailing over your head, the structure of the joke is timeless. Joke 2. The dragon in his story is described as smelling like the tannery, which earns a groan from anyone who's walked past it today, you included. Joke 3. He claims the knight's armor was so poorly made it doubled as a bread oven, which sounds less like an insult and more like an entrepreneurial opportunity. As the tale winds down, someone passes around a tray of pastries, small, fried, and dusted with something that might be sugar, or might be finely ground mystery. You take one. It's crisp, warm, and just sweet enough to remind you that sugar here is a luxury, one that probably cost someone a month's wage. The music picks up again, and the courtyard sways with the rhythm. You consider staying, but the light is shifting toward dusk, the shadows stretching longer between the buildings. Laughter is one kind of soundtrack. The night has its own. And from somewhere beyond the courtyard's edge, you hear the low murmur of that other song, the one you're not sure you want to dance to. You drain the last of the cider, hand back the mug, and slip out into the street, where the air has cooled and the sky is taking on that deepening blue that makes lamps glow brighter. The lane ahead is darker, narrower, and filled with voices that aren't singing. Dusk slides into the town like ink in water, quiet, inevitable, and suddenly everywhere. The courtyard's music fades behind you, replaced by the click of shutters, the thud of bolts, and that particular hush that happens when people decide together that it's time to be indoors. You're still outside. The lanes that were messy but readable by day are now a different language, written in shadow. Lamps? Not here. A few windows glow with rushlights, but the streets themselves are lit by moon, habit, and optimism. Your boots test the ground as if it's new terrain, which, in a way, it is. The puddles have become small galaxies reflecting the last light. The ruts are guesses more than lines. You cup your hands around a tinder spark. You begged off a kindly cooper and coax a stub of tallow candle to life. The flame flickers, illuminating precisely enough to show you how much you're not seeing. You hold it higher. The draft kills it. Joke 1. Congrats, you've invented the medieval phone flashlight. Battery life measured in size. Mainstream historical fact. Towns commonly rang a curfew bell at nightfall, signaling that fires should be banked and people should clear the streets. The bell you heard earlier? Not just theatrical ambiance, policy. Quirky tidbit. Some watchmen carried noisy clappers to warn honest folk of their approach, and dishonest folk that honesty was on patrol. You hear a wooden rattle somewhere up ahead and decide you prefer clappers to surprises. Historians still argue whether curfew enforcement was strict daily practice or more of a hopeful guideline, but either way, night belongs to patrols, stray animals, and the urgent. A figure materializes at the bend of the lane, a watchman in a heavy cloak, a billhook over his shoulder, a lantern shielded against the wind. He eyes you, registers outsider, and grunts. Name? You give your invented village again. He asks where you're lodging. You describe the sign, the bed and jug. He sniffs as if the air might confirm your story, then waves you on. Advice, tossed like a coin. Keep to the main lane. Don't stray. If you hear the hue and cry, run toward light. You thank him and don't ask what happens if the light runs out. The main lane is a ghost of daytime commerce. Stalls stand folded like sleeping animals. A cat darts from under an awning with a rat in its mouth. A tiny triumph staged for no one and you. From a side passage, a soft whistle. You pause. Another whistle answers from farther off. You keep moving. A dog pads behind you for 20 steps, decides you're not interesting, and peels away toward a more promising shadow. Past the market cross, the ground slopes and the town wall rises, its silhouette cutting the sky. Gates closed. Another reality of walled towns after dark. The idea of leaving is academic now. You're in until morning or bribery, and only one of those is honest. A man seated under the eaves of a gatehouse mutters something about after-hours fees with the tone of a professional problem solver. You shake your head and back away. No need to test which side of legal he represents. Your heel twinges. The bandage from the surgeon holds. But every uneven step is a reminder that night is less forgiving. You edge around a heap of something that smells like hay and definitely isn't just hay. The wind turns and with it your stomach, which has been holding a tense meeting since the skewer. A quiet lane appears to your right, promising relief in the form of privacy. You take 2 steps into it, hear a soft scuff, and take the same 2 steps backward. Your instincts and your stomach file contradictory motions. You grant your instincts a temporary injunction. Another watchman passes, this one reciting a time call. Something like 9 of the clock and all's well, the words blurred by wool and wind. Early modern? Maybe. But the reassurance lands anyway, thin and brave. He nods at you and taps his lantern, a shared belief that light is a plan. You skirt a churchyard, its stones tilting like tired teeth. In the porch gleam 2-ig iron rings, sanctuary rings by reputation, though how often they were used here is anyone's guess. In some places, a fugitive could grab one and claim time-limited refuge. You tug it gently. It booms dully in the wood. The sound makes you feel both safer and very visible. You move on. 2 men emerge from an alley mid-argument, their voices hot, their hands quicker than their sense. You flatten into a doorway. A 3rd man, older, sober, wearing a badge that catches the moon, steps between them with the easy weight of someone paid to shorten stories. The men lower their hands. The badge nods to you, not unkindly, as if to say, yes, we do this often. Historians still argue whether town watches reduced crime significantly or mainly moved it around. But in this moment, their presence tilts the scale toward order. You keep to the center of the lane, where the mud is least deceptive and the sightlines are longest. From the left, laughter spills. A tavern that hasn't heard the bell or has chosen selective hearing. You glance in as the door opens and see heat, light, and the full spectrum of bad ideas. Tempting, but the room upstairs with its crunchy pillow still counts as yours, and yours feels like a rare luxury. You press on. A gust lifts your cloak. The air stings with wood smoke and a thread of panic. Ahead, someone is shouting, "Fire!" It's the one word that empties dispute of hierarchy. Doors fly open, buckets appear like magic tricks, and bodies run toward the glow. You jog forward with them because you are human and because night plus flame is every town's nightmare. A roof edge crackles, sparks ride the wind. Bucket to bucket, hands slap water into rhythm, and a woman on a ladder smacks the thatch with a wet sheet like she's beating a devil out of it. Mainstream fact again. Urban fire was a constant fear, which is why curfew meant banking hearths and why fines for careless flames could be brutal. The glow shrinks from orange to sullen red. Neighbors shout the kind of jokes that people tell when relief needs somewhere to go. Your candle stub returns as a sad wax comma in your pocket. A man with soot eyebrows tells you, "Could have been half the street." You nod, add a bucket, and pass it along because participating is the tax of presence. When the last hiss dies, everyone counts. Houses, neighbors, blessings, and disperses. You realize you've been standing under a sign you recognize, the bed and jug. Home, such as it is. Your shoulder muscles unclench in stages. You push the door, duck inside, and hold your breath as eyes adjust from night to firelight. The room downstairs is quieter now. A few late drinkers clustered like islands. The innkeeper points his chin toward the stair. You climb. In your room, you wedge the shutter slightly, enough for air, not enough for opportunists, and re-inspect the bed like someone negotiating a truce with a small nation. You turn the mattress, give it a firm thump, because why not, and spread your cloak again. Another layer in your private arms race. With fauna you prefer not to meet by name. Joke 2. You promise the mattress an excellent review if it refrains from personal introductions. Joke 3. You consider leaving a tip for any flea that observes quiet hours. You lie down, muscles buzzing with the long day's math. Wells, porridge, nobles, knives, tannery, carts, magistrate, meat, bugs, bells, and fire. Through the cracked shutter, the town makes night sounds, the drip in a gutter, a distant watch rattle, the sleep whisper of someone turning over in the room next door. Your heel throbs like a metronome set 2 clicks too fast. Your stomach mutters terms. The straw beneath you negotiates. You tell yourself you've made it past the worst, that midnight is a watershed. The truth is gentler and less generous. The clock, whatever the time actually is, still has hours to spend. You curl into the cloak, lengthen your breath, and try to be the kind of quiet the night accepts as one of its own. Outside, the bell tests the air once more. Inside, you test the bed once more. Between those 2 experiments hangs a fragile intention. To see the morning. You mean to sleep? You really do. But the bed has opinions. The straw shifts like tall grass under a fox. The linen sighs, and your cloak, deployed as treaty, keeps sliding off your shoulder as if defecting to the other side. A mouse skitters in the wall with the confident gait of a tenant who paid up front. From downstairs, the last voices soften to murmurs. Mugs thud once. Then the inn exhales into silence that isn't empty so much as densely packed with small sounds. The timbers tick, your heels heartbeat, and the quiet marching band rustle of whatever tiny citizens share this mattress with you. You close your eyes and try the breathing trick. Slow in, slower out. It almost works, right up until your stomach files an after-hours grievance about the street skewer. The complaint begins politely, then circles back with stronger penmanship. You sit up gently because any sudden move changes your truce with the straw. The shutter leaks a ribbon of moonlight onto the floor. Dust floats through like snow, deciding whether to land. There's a chamber pot beneath the bed. You found it earlier with your foot, an exploratory nudge that produced the hollow ring of, "Yes, I'm here, please don't kick me over." You retrieve it now like a diplomat removing a delicate artifact from its box. Joke 1. Never in your life have you rooted for ceramics so passionately. Mainstream historical fact: nighttime was navigated by routine. Bank the hearth, secure the door, say the prayers, use the pot, and hope the roof holds. Because going outside after curfew could invite fines or worse. Quirky tidbit: some households kept a small coal alive in a lidded earthenware chafing pot to warm hands and feet, which also doubled as an exquisitely medieval way to toast anxiety. Historians still argue whether people here commonly practiced segmented sleep, that first sleep till midnight, a wakeful hour for talk or prayers, then second sleep till dawn, or whether it varied wildly by season and station. Your body votes for segmentation in the most practical sense. You sit in the dim, waiting for the worst of the cramps to pass, listening to the town's slow pulse. Outside, a watchman's clapper rattles once, far off, like two wooden teeth chatting. Someone on the lane coughs, the tired, ordinary cough of a human who will wake and do it all again tomorrow. A donkey answers with a grim little bray. Even the geese are quiet, which feels like a sign the cosmos is trying to be kind. The air shifts. A thin thread of smoke noses in at the shutter, not the emergency orange you helped beat back earlier, but the low, familiar breath of banked fires. You remember, again, why the curfew bell matters. Yet the room is cooling, and your feet are cold in a way that writes long letters to your calves. You angle your cloak over your toes and reshape the pillow into a shape pillow adjacent. Joke 2. You're pretty sure the pillow was a chicken in a former life and has retained its commitment to wandering. Sleep hovers near, testing flavors. You think about the day in vignettes, wells and alleys, and that moment in church when you almost took a guild spot. The tannery's assault marching up your nose like an army. The bucket line where strangers became neighbors for 10 wet minutes. The noble's retainer measuring you like a problem he might have to solve later. You even, faintly, rebelliously, smile at the memory of the storyteller's dragon that smelled like oak bark and despair. The mind edits quickly. It has to, here. Your heel pulses, but the surgeon's wormwood has cooled its politics. You flex your toes to reassure your spine that it's not alone. Somewhere above, a roof tile clicks as it settles. Somewhere below, a sleeper turns over, and the whole house sympathetically answers with a low wooden hum. For a minute, the bed and you sign a ceasefire, and then the ceasefire defects to the enemy. An itch blossoms at your wrist, another near your knee. The sheet does that mysterious ripple again. You slap delicately, ASMR warfare, and decide to execute Plan B, strategic relocation. You slide to the floor, pull the cloak with you, and curl beside the bed with your back against the wall, where the stone keeps a cool, steady promise. It's less comfortable in theory, more comfortable in truth. Joke 3. Congratulations, you've discovered the luxury suite known as the floor, featuring a firm mattress and complimentary draft. Time thins into threads. You drift, surface, drift again. When you wake, your mouth is dry and the room has shifted its balance of dark and gray. The window now holds the first rumor of dawn. Your stomach has softened its stance. The pressure in your heel is just a nudge. For a fragile span, you are warm enough, still enough, and the bedbugs, if that's who they are, have accepted your application to not be their project tonight. A faint patter begins, a shy rain, testing the roof with careful fingers. The sound turns the room into a soft drum. The town stirs in reply. A cartwheel groans. A distant door complains. The watch rattle clicks a last time and goes quiet. You realize with a slow, startled pride that you have technically lasted the night, though lasted has never earned its syllables so honestly. Mainstream facts quieter, cousin. Gates open at dawn, and with them come bread deliveries, bleary bargaining, and the long arithmetic of another day. You picture the baker's hands dusting flour across the board, the paddle sliding loaves into the oven's mouth, that first wave of smell that could make a poem out of hunger. You picture, too, the well, rain doing what civic engineering can't, and the market's first voices finding their volume. You stand carefully, heel, knee, back, dignity in that order, and set the chamber pot back under the bed with the ceremonious care of returning a crown jewel to its niche. You shake the cloak, brush straw from your sleeves, and tie your laces with the reverence of someone who now believes in knots. Your coin purse is lighter, your head is heavier. Your respect for the people who do this every day is a cathedral being built stone by stone. Historians still argue whether the Middle Ages were brutish inevitability or intricate resilience, but your verdict is simple. It's both, stacked together like a trencher under stew, soaking, bearing, giving what it can. You adjust the shutter, invite the morning in, and practice the ancient art of pretending you meant to do it this way all along. Downstairs, the inn yawns. The first bench scrapes. The hearth reconsiders flame. Someone coughs a daylight cough. You slip into the lane, and the town meets you, not with trumpets, but with the workaday overture of hooves, voices, a bucket kissing a stone lip. You are still an outsider, still itchy, still negotiating with your insides, but you are standing. And for today, in this place, that is triumph enough. You pull your cloak tighter, aim your boots toward bread, and promise your future self that if there's a lesson here, it's this. In a world built from chores and chances, survival favors the patient, the observant, and the slightly lucky. Morning chooses a color and paints the rooftops. You walk into it. Let the streets fade now, the clatter softening to a hush, the cobbles smoothing into a quiet shore. You don't need to hold the map anymore. Let the lanes fold themselves neatly and tuck into the corners of your mind, like a book you'll return to later. Already warm with fingerprints. Breathe in, easy. A calm, even breath. The night has passed. The worries have spent their noise. What remains is steady and still. A slow bell far away. A thin line of light at the window. The homey murmur of a house deciding to wake. You can set your bundle down. No one is asking for anything right now. Feel the weight of the blanket, the harmless creak of timber settling, the harmless rustle of fabric as you turn just enough to be comfortable. Everything sharp has softened its edges. The tannery becomes only a word. The market is a picture with the sound turned low. Even the geese are small white commas drifting out of the sentence. The breath you're taking now is long, generous, and unhurried. Let the exhale take twice as long. Let it gather the day's edges and smooth them flat. If any thoughts remain, let them come as lanterns on slow water, passing, reflecting, carrying their own gentle glow away from you. You don't need to chase them. The body understands what to do. It sorts, it stores, it lets go. Your heartbeat finds an old, patient rhythm. Your shoulders follow. Imagine clean air moving through a quiet room, a window cracked to the first blue of morning, a simple loaf resting on the table for when you wake. Nothing demands you move. Nothing demands you decide. The story has placed its last period, and the page is soft with white space. Stay here, easy, unguarded. Drift if you like. Sleep if you wish. The town will wait. The morning will wait. And you can rest now. Sweet and slow, quiet and safe.